On top board, Andy Lee versus Chiron Griffin. And some of the usuals chasing the first place, Ezra Chambers and Elliot Winslow. So we'll have a wrap-up of some of round 7's game later, but something's going on in the chess world. There's two of our regulars that we have here, two young girls. It's Rui Yang Yan and Rochelle Wu. They're now in St. Louis. They're playing the girls' championship there. There's also a junior championship, and for the first time, a serious senior championship with some of the old people like Larry Christensen and Joel Benjamin, Alex Yermolinsky, who many of you may remember here. So since they're not here, our two young girls were playing. They're both doing very well. So Rui had white against Rochelle in this game, and kind of impressed that 11 and 12-year-olds can play this way. They start off with a classic Sicilian, and of course, it seems like all the kids know their openings very well. They're well coached, well versed, and so here's a knight Sicilian that Rochelle plays. Rochelle is quite a fearless player, I noticed. She'll just try things. But Rui plays a circumspect move, just developing the bishop the way Karpov would play. And Rochelle hits the knight the way Bobby Fischer used to do. But Rui just, instead of going knight to b3, little safer, knight f3. And both sides develop. All pretty sensible developing moves. Castles, knight out, and Rui just takes the knight, kind of simplifying the position, trying to still work on this d5 square. So now she attacks the bishop that kind of defends it, and Rochelle just castles. She's not going to lose time in development. So takes, and at least the pawn is defending some of these center squares. So this is all about equal so far. But now, after bishop to this nice diagonal, Rochelle plays something a little funny. It's sort of natural just to develop the queen, you guard that, you can put the rooks in back, and the position's about equal. So she just goes a little wrong, queen defending, but Rui, yes, Rui just goes back to a safer square. The bishop wasn't very secure on that square anyway. Rochelle gets out, but and rook to d8, looking to advance pawn to d5. But a nice move from Rui, just queen to e2, so that if this pawn advances, then suddenly the e5 pawn is unprotected. And here Rochelle has run into this problem. How do I actually do anything in this position? I don't know if you ever get in that situation. Any kind of advancing move you make creates these weaknesses, so you feel a bit bottled up. Still, it's very hard to control it. You figure eventually your opponent will make a mistake and you can get out. So now Rochelle puts the queen on this a better square where it should have been. And Rui calmly just takes some extra squares on the queen side, makes a nice knight maneuver, getting to a good square. Queen comes over, knight hops down, rook has to move out of the way, and now time to develop your rooks. So again, what is black to do? Can't advance in the center. She makes a pretty good choice. Let's try to make the bishop active over here. Bishop to h6. And now I like this move, and especially when you see just a young girl playing it. Not at all. Just a very cool move. Get the king off of the black squares. Later on, that's going to save you a tempo. Some check would always happen on that diagonal. So the king's just a bit safer. Knight to h5. Okay, looking for some activity, but it's not so much by itself. Knight hits the pawn. Queen defends it. And now you say, okay, restrict those black pieces on the king side. So again, kind of tough to see what to do for black. Rochelle goes back. Rui comes here. And how you add the pressure, well, you might think Karpov is playing the white side. Just now get the rooks onto the D file, and all of white's pieces are in great shape to just stop black from doing everything in the center. So it's been very calm play, very seasoned play from young Rui. Rochelle tries to do something active over here. It's not really happening. Rui offers the exchange of queens, and she goes back. Now, if the rook takes the pawn, you can take that pawn check. So queen to e3, hitting that. Queen to e7. And knight to c4. So finally, that nice, calm play by white is gaining some fruit. You can't defend the d6 pawn. So it's just bad. The strategy hasn't worked for Rochelle, but she lashes out. If you're going to lose a pawn, try to get some activity. Takes, and rook takes on d5. Rook takes. So white has won a clean pawn here. Well, okay. Rochelle is very tricky. I mean, has anybody here played her? Not.
She beat me.
She beat you. She
On Saturday, 5 rounds.
Okay. Well, she played Patrick Wolf in 2 Blitz games, and she won both those games too. It's so very talented and tricky player. Well, she comes back. Okay, instead of just being 1 pawn down, she's going to, give up another, and try to get some open lines, hoping for some kind of discovered, some checks or something. Okay, hope chess is better than no chess at all. Something. And here finally Rui makes a mistake. She should just not worry about that, just kind of stop the queen from getting in. and she'll be 2 pawns up. But she makes, they're getting close to time pressure. She makes an aggressive move, attacking the queen.
What about the other one?
Of-
Going up, that one,
The rook coming
that one going up,
to the 7th rank.
yeah.
Okay, I think you could do that in any, the queen would give a check in any case. And your move is better than what Rui played.
That's what I'm talking.
Your move is better. In fact, we'll see exactly why moving the rook would have been better too.
Yeah.
She makes just, maybe it happens in your games, sometimes it happens in my view. You play a great game and you make one mistake. Things go wrong.
You made the second from last mistake.
And Rochelle Wu, you don't want to make the mistakes against because she just jumps on it. And she went check, and actually there's, Rui plays the most natural move. She could do something better, but here, and what do you think Rochelle played in this position?
That's it, right there.
Knight, yes, knight to g4.
That's the end
And
of that.
you wanted her to move the rook so it wouldn't be attacked. You can't take the knight because of queen to f1 checkmate. But maybe Rory was planning on this because she just said, okay, I'm not taking you, I'm not falling for that, and I'm on your queen.
Just takes the
Takes the rook. Knight takes rook. Bishop takes rook. And that's maybe what she really missed. You're threatening the queen, looks like you just get out of it, no problems. But Rochelle went, bishop takes rook. And Yuri went, uh-oh. If queen takes queen, the knight forks you. Maybe what she missed 2 moves back. And if queen takes bishop, well, you can't take the bishop because the knight will take you. So poor Rui just resigned. 2 moves ago she was winning, but she lost. And, well, that actually gave Rochelle 4 out of 4. Right now she's leading the tournament with 4.5 out of 5. So, and young Rui's got 3 out of 5. She's still doing well despite this game. So we're well represented in the girls' championship. It's nice. That's Ulrich Sinkfeld in St. Louis gets these extra tournaments there. So if you guys happen to know a billionaire, please just refer him to us. What's that? What, okay, try to convince him, please. So, there's another game there. There's quite some interesting ones, but somebody who was a really great attacker of yesteryear, but doesn't play much anymore, is Larry Christensen. And winning 2 out of 2, although now he's half a point off the lead. Pawns. But here he had white against Jan Elvest, who's kind of Estonian, but I guess he counts as American or something. It's
This is the senior championship, right?
yes.
So I looked at their biographies. 10 out of the 12 players were born in Eastern Europe. Born there,
And yeah, all the Soviet Union, I think.
Yes,
We could have
Ukraine,
been represented.
Estonia, any of those.
And Larry Christensen and Joel Benjamin are born in America, but
They're the only ones.
a lot of them have been here a long time, like Yermolinsky, for example. But yes, some of them,
Used to be standing right there where you were.
Yermolinsky, yes. He's now in South Dakota.
Did I get you extra bonuses on your, extra points for you?
Yeah, the heartland, living in the heartland. But let's see Christensen against Elvest, because it starts out very normal, and then, yes, Christensen has white. It starts with a D pawn, and they transpose into a kind of Pirt's defense. All just your classical opening, played thousands of times. So Christensen develops. Elvest castles. Pawn to C6, again pretty normal. And maybe a little unusual, bishop to D3. Certainly, pardon? Okay. Well, Christensen likes it too, just developing in the center. And Elvest tries to get play on the queen side, pushing these pieces out. This is now move 8 we're going to see. Well, Christensen brings his bishop out to exchange the fianchetto bishop. And maybe this move isn't so precise from Elvest. But this is probably a mistake. Queen C7 works in a lot of other positions, but here things go sour quite quickly. Bishop takes. Thank you, Craig. Bishop takes bishop. King takes the bishop. You want to guess the next move? Okay. All right. Well, I'll give you the next move, and then you'll find all the rest. First he starts with pawn to E5. Okay, the very logical move, you know, advancing in the center. The question, of course, is Elvest played this move on your E-pawn that it's attacked. This is move 10.
And you go the other way instead?
Well, let's just look at it from the white side. It's more entertaining. Okay, we've got it. As someone who knows Christensen's style, yes, look at the caveman approach, you know, just charge in.
We're going to sacrifice his pieces.
Yeah. And it's extremely dangerous. You know, it's there's always a point to it. The thing is, if you take this pawn to H5, your queen, bishop, rook, you're opening up. That's just a threat to crash in.
Is this Serra Christensen Serra?
No, this is Christensen Elvest. Yes.
It's like this is Zig, right? You know, I feel like you traded the rook can come over and defend an H8.
Okay, shall we try that? You know, yeah, you're right, because Elvest thought, surely there's a defense here. Surely there's a defense. But say we go here, and you would take, you'd probably take if your idea was to put the rook on H8, but trades,
But I think I'm
check.
thinking positions where G8 knight and C8 bishop is developed, and I don't have this problem thinking back.
Aha.
The guy or my opponent doesn't have a problem.
Very good, very good. You're seeing why this attack does work. It works because of this over here. Now that you look at it, you say, oh, wow, they're all stuck over here. The king's over here by himself. You know, I can knight G5 or castle or
Well, actually, knight G5 and bishop takes G6.
there's probably several ways to just crash in here.
So is this
And
really winning for white here?
yeah, here is absolutely winning.
Well, white can get all of his pieces over there before black can entangle anything.
Yes.
Was this the game?
No, this Elvis could see coming. He said, you know, all right. He probably thought he could take the pawn, and
Maybe H5 and black.
takes pawn on e5, h4. Very, you know, really straightforward, strong move. So yes, he did try to stop it because, so he did do h5. Oh, I'm sorry, rook is on f8. Thank you. Okay, we've got a g4 suggestions. Any others? That's,
G5, now that defending the pawn, and also he can't kick you out. I don't know, maybe. Ooh, E6 is pretty sick. All kinds of possibilities.
okay,
You know, bishop takes G6 actually. That's really
bishop takes g6. Okay, I think you're all putting it together. Could I hear those suggestions again? 1 g4, any others?
See, I'm slow here. You said 1 G4?
Sorry. Queen g5, g4. Oh, okay. He played e6. If you look at your attacking pieces, the bishop, queen, the knight, maybe the rook can get up there, but you're trying to get him quickly before these ones can help out. So e6 just, you know,
I
it.
mean, I would have thought that was a good idea, except for it doesn't it force like knight F6 or something? He's like, he's helping black development, so he better be right.
Okay, that's a good criteria. You better be right. That's.
Better be right.
We can start with the, again, if you take the pawn, yeah, now bishop takes g6 would be, yeah, he'd have to take queen g5 check. You can see takes, probably take the pawn. And rook h3. It's just too fast. Rook g6 check is rook g3 checks the end. So, okay, he can't take on e6, and once again Elvis saw that, and he queen on d2. He played knight to f6 as you suggested. But now Christensen, okay, he just took the pawn here, and that was a big defensive pawn. That this g6 square is so weak. You know, if rook takes queen to g5 or something. So Elvis just tried to stop queen to g5 with knight h7. And Christensen followed up with knight to g5, which, you know, okay, you can trade and get the queen to g5, but you're also defending the f7 pawn. And this was move 14, and Elvis resigned.
Is Elvis a professional player in the States now, or?
I believe he lives most of the time in Estonia.
Oh,
he was,
Top 10 before.
he used to, yes, in fact,
world.
I believe he was rated number 4 in the world at one point, years ago.
But he was playing Reno, didn't you play in Reno?
Yeah, yes,
That was a couple of years.
I mean, a couple of decades.
So next, you consider professional chess player?
oh, he was very much a,
I mean, even now, or
Huh?
does he do something else?
I'm not sure, because a lot of these people in the senior tournament are, you know, semi-professional or doing something else. But Larry Christensen, I know he teaches a lot of chess, but I like to see him play because he just throws the pieces at you and ready to sacrifice at a moment's notice.
I think he has a book, Storming the Ramparts or something.
Rocking the Ramparts. Storming the Barricades.
Oh, Storming the Barricades.
There's two of them. Storming the Barricades and Rocking the Ramparts.
Okay, well, what is that?
Take my rooks, please.
Yes, he's done.
After Larry see videos.
So if you want to attack, just look at his games. The other thing from around the world that I thought I'd show you before we get to the Tuesday night games is our new American. Yes, Linnea Dominguez, who's
It's an American, United States.
okay. Well, I'll call him Cuban in his previous until a year ago, until he moved to the United States, and he's been a top 20 player for a long, long time. He's 35 years old, young by most standards, but that's getting quite old. And suddenly, from being around the 20th player in the world, he's got some new ambition. Moved to America, putting a lot of energy into his chess, a lot of effort, studying more, and he's risen to number 8 in the world. So that's really good for our Olympic team. It's nice to see some.
Would have meant we have 4 in the top 6. Nakamura has tanked.
Yes, Wesley Stowe is doing very well, back up to number 4 in the world. Caruana's number 2 in the world. But yes, Nakamura seems, even though he's the current U.S. champion, he seems to have lost some energy, some ambition, and he's sort of sinking down.
Seems like Blitz.
Blitz, bullet chess.
Did he get married?
Yeah, he does.
Basis.
I believe that was some years ago he got married.
But Nakamura's married.
I,
Is?
I,
I
I'm-
just asked.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
But-
Did anybody see him last year at the Chess finals in the stock market? He was here. He wasn't playing. He wasn't. I don't think he was even doing commentary. But he was a changed man. He looked like the Japanese American version of NBL. He had a suit on, he was clean cut and quiet, if you can imagine.
That doesn't sound like him.
I think he was trying to look like his old man. I don't know. NBL, Maxim
Okay, this game is Linnea Dominguez against the star or almost star of last month, in Pomniachtchi, who's become the highest rated Russian player in the world.
on the cover of the new Inside Chess. I mean, new Chess.
Okay, yeah, he's been doing very well lately, winning a lot of games. But Linnea had white against him. They start off with a Caro-Kann defense. And Pomniachtchi replies with a delayed French defense. Has its points. This takes kind of transposing into the French defense where you give up the center. On the other hand, it took 2 moves for the pawn to come to c5. So he plays for quick development. and Dominguez attacks that pawn, but Nepomniachtchi is ready to sacrifice it, as in the French poison pawn variation. Not to spend too much time on their openings, which I'm sure they have worked out very carefully. He declines the pawn and plays for squares on the queen side, the queen guarding the b4 pawn. And before moving the bishop, he hits the queen, which certainly can't take the pawn now, as the rook would hit it. So he moves, and Nepomniachtchi just retreats. Both sides develop, and actually kind of very reasonable opening from both sides. A few weaknesses, but they've also got some key center squares here. It's roughly about equal. Dominguez is putting the knight where it'll control some of these critical squares in the center. Nepomniachtchi.
What about the other one? That one right there.
How do you learn notation?
I can't spit it out.
This pawn,
That big one.
This-
Not that one, right up there. You know, you think he's all got it. Not up that one. That
the
one.
knight, the knight hitting you.
Yes,
Okay, good question, yes.
what I'm talking about. Hey.
Thank you. Yes, we would take that one. It's such a troublemaker. We have to give up our bishop for that. But the pawns are rather ugly after that. Sometimes you do that in the French to get the file, but I think these pawns are kind of weak here. So he tries to play on the other side. And Dominguez advances, but now this knight's going to come to get that bishop anyway. Although white's gotten a bit of space over here. So the way they trade off the pluses and minuses is quite interesting, and of course they're two of the top 10 players in the world. It's very well done. No, it's very, yes. The tournament is the Dortmund Sparkassen, that's long time control. It's the tournament that Kramnik won almost every time he played it, something like 8 times. Kramnik retired last year, so the Russian is Nepomniachtchi instead of Kramnik. Just to get a bit orientated, what would you play on the white side here? Knight G5, threatening mate. That's not a bad idea. I think I'd take the bishop check first and then play knight to F5. Castling's possible. It's that's it. Well, I'll show you his move. What I like about his move is it's keeps the whole position cohesive. It's more harmonious. He develops the bishop and says, all right, you can get my nice light squared bishop, but which does happen because you're threatening bishop takes knight and queen takes pawn. So he takes it, which normally you don't like to give up your good piece, but what you always need to do is look at what is left. And you've lost this bishop, but suddenly this bishop is quite powerful. And castling right now, well, this pawn's advanced. You're a bit weakened on that square. Nepomniachtchi develops attacking that pawn. Hard to criticize that move. And Dominguez plays queen over here. And Then the knight comes to a very good square. And Dominguez takes the open file. All very classic play here so far. Now Nepomniachtchi plays quite an aggressive move, pawn to g5, ready to kick the knight out. When the bishop and knight, you'd cover some of these center squares. So Dominguez slows him down a bit. Remember, the queen's still over here, so you can't push that pawn. Yeah, yes, very true. There's the pin on the rooks. So Nepomniachtchi brings his last piece into play, and Dominguez swaps it off. He takes, and if the knight takes the pawn on g5, the queen can come into c3. Well, we could see why he doesn't do that. If you take it, the queen attacks that there, and you have some rook g8 moves. You're getting play for the black side. So yes, let's get a couple suggestions. We're getting to the critical point of the game. What would you play for white? Very good. Very good. I mean, and I quite like this move. The king holds some squares here. You keep the rook here for the moment, as you say that, you know, he can't advance because of the pin. Castling might have run into the pawn storm anyway. So king e2 is very good. And this position is about equal, but
Bishop takes b4, oh, it's a check. So you should maybe move his king.
Who-
D8. I said if he wasn't in check, he has bishop takes b5, followed by a knight forward.
oh, okay. Well, right now this knight is good.
Right. He's got a couple issues to get rid of.
You mean you need to take and push
Yeah,
it
get rid of that.
and not get pinned?
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
problems.
needs a little bit of a setup, yeah.
G8.
Could go rook g8. Then I might prevent that and hit you with g4 myself, now that you haven't got me pinned. Probably the best move, according to the computer, is queen to d8, just holding these squares. Again, pretty reasonable. Nepomniachtchi plays his queen to b8. Yeah, he'd really love to get in g4 at some point. Or maybe also,
You could be looking at queen h7 to a7, right, to hit the f2.
well, okay, we should move along. In fact, that's what he does the next move. He's also maybe an idea of knight checks, knight takes, queen takes, pawn check. And Dominguez stops all that with knight to b3. But he played queen a7, so you're playing like the 6th highest rated player in the world.
One or two moves.
Yeah.
Snap out of the moment.
Well, the problem is that's a small mistake.
See?
But at this level, that's big enough.
You just defend it somehow, right? And one,
I mean, you could go like, yeah, rook to f1 and defend it, but that's a passive rook. So can you,
you got
this move actually gains white quite a nice advantage. Will someone suggest?
you got D4 is development.
D4, I've got 1, 2, you're right, D4, he can't take it. But then, yeah, if I could get in, you could. D4 is like a reasonable move.
You do rook C1.
Rook to C1. And what if I take your pawn?
Knight to D4.
Oh, that's like a C5.
C5.
Rook C8 check.
Who said that?
Yeah.
Your rook c1 was the move. That was, yes, this, he would,
Oh, that's queen, yeah.
and pawn check would, well, that just wins. It just wins. So Nepomniachtchi didn't fall for that, but after rook c1, he was in big trouble. It suddenly, your whole idea to take and be active, and you can't do it, and your king is caught in the crossfire in the center. So he couldn't really get out. You know, king d8 walking this way, and the knights start coming in. Knight c5 is a move. It's already very bad news here. Yes, with this one move, suddenly everything starts to work for white. As there's some Tuesday night games to get to, I'll show you what he did. He tried to defend. He tried to deflect the white from this side of the board by sacrificing the pawn. Takes, queen takes, and then he took the pawn.
Can you still play that rook check? Instead of dealing with those pawns, can you still play rook C8 check?
This position. Okay. It's queen is on A4. Oh, that's a queen there, sorry. He pushed the pawn, pawn takes, queen is still on A4 here.
Because the bishop's still in.
Yes, you can't, rook down takes. So that was his idea, to deflect the queen over here.
Now, even though, instead of that right there, couldn't you play the knight like knight to D4? Because the pawn's threatening to take on F3 with check, right? So if he plays knight to D4, knight takes, bishop takes, then rook C8 works.
Okay, maybe, but he could just trade the one knight. But he took this, and he saw that he was going to take this, and this looks like queen E3 check. It's going to be really bad. But he brings the knight up that cuts off the bishop, and now you're threatening king takes the bishop. And bishop takes is just going to keep you in the crossfire. So Nepomniachtchi played here, and he's still got some squares. If that knight moves, the queen comes down check. But here Dominguez finished him off. White to move. You are on a roll today. This rook is the one causing all the trouble. Back to the square you came from.
You can't take it. You can't take it.
Yes, if you take it, the queen comes down check. Yes, the knight checkmate anywhere. Anything you put in the way is going to be mate from the bishop. So it's another one of those moves that, oh no, it's you think you have power in the file, and suddenly your opponent takes it over, and you're just hugely on the defensive. So he tried to defend, but now there's no play for black over here, and Dominguez just yeah, you would let the queen get in. Here, you could play solidly. He wrapped this up very efficiently. He just attacked the knight that was defending the bishop. Yes, and defending g7. And here Nepomniachtchi just gave up. he's losing at least 2 pieces for the rook, and the attack is raging after that too. So great game from Dominguez, who's playing like he's going to soon be in the 2800 club.
Does he have a chance to be a candidate, or is it too late?
You know, that's kind of an interesting question. He's played with such energy here. I'd say if Magnus weren't world champion, then he'd have a chance to challenge for the title. He certainly could get in the candidates tournament if he keeps up with what he's doing.
Rating-wise,
Yeah, the candidates is usually the top 8 players in the world, and right now he's rated number 8. So now the Tuesday night marathon games, and as many as we can get through, we've got some very interesting positions that came up last round. But this we'll look at the game, Rafik Rubiel against Ella Papanek, and starts out with the kind of sensible, tame opening on English. Pawn to G3. Bishop G2. Knight C6. Castles. Knight C3. And then instead of D4, a kind of restrained move from Rafik. And Ella seems to just charge out. Pawn to E3, rook E8. Now, could move the queen, could go pawn to B3. Knight E2 is a little bit strange. So Ella advances in the center, and Rafik takes. Knight takes. So black has a little more control over the center here. Pawn A3 is good to control these squares. Ella plays bishop G4. And Rafik plays queen A4, hitting the bishop on G4. You could go queen to D2 or something, but Ella just advances. Okay, so that's a lot of control. There's the question of Rafik now plays here with this pin on the diagonal. And yeah, that looks like it could be a little trouble since the bishop can't get back. But Ella plays knight A5, not only guarding the pawn, hitting the queen, and Rafik comes back. And some people, they might slow down or something, but I'm getting a sense of Ella's style. She charges forward. Oh, excuse me, if I got this right. Yes, it went pawn takes, and now quite a move from Rafik. He's, if the knight moves, the bishop would take. he counterattacks rook to d1 on that on the knight on d5. So she goes back, guarding the knight, meanwhile still attacking the knight on f3, and knight retreated out of take to e1. We get a very interesting position here. All sorts of things happening. So, pardon?
Was there a miss? Could you play pawn takes knight
Rook takes d5,
back to e6?
maybe a knight to f4, knight, bishop takes, yeah, a little,
It's a nice thing, but yeah, I was
it'll come.
see it all.
So give the others a chance to answer this next question, because I think you would get this one. Ella decides this is the most action move she can do. Knight f4 is what she played. You're opening your queen, hitting her queen. It's a... And this is very good preparation for your own game. Try to think this through. I naturally had to ask Tony, the man who does all the mate and threes, what to do here. And so he gave me his answer, but this is one of those mind-boggling positions. Everything's happening there. And can you work this through? What should you do?
It's not take, by the way, you guys, did you know?
Okay, I know you have your own games. Also, Tony, you have to play rook d8, which was played in the game. And you said rook to d8, which I'll give you the next moves. It then continued check, and here, and bishop takes queen, which we'll get back to. But it's funny. Now, maybe any human will say that. If you really calm down, slow down, and you just should take the knight, which very hard move to do. Both queens are hanging, and you don't take. But if you could calmly take the knight first, you're still going to have the queen exchange, but there won't be a knight takes knight check. Well, white is better. White is better. Black, if the queen takes the rook, the queen takes the bishop check. That one's good for white. If the bishop takes the queen, the rook takes the queen, you can take it back, and then you get two pieces for a rook. White can get a little bit of a bind, but it's better for the white side. Good for white. But yeah, that's a hard move to make. Both queens attacked, and you just leave them there.
Is that clearly better for white or?
It's clearly better for white if you're very careful. Yeah. But I have to give Ella credit. That's just, Mikhail tall chess. You throw the pieces out there, and it's too confusing for your opponent. So So we repeat the move, knight to f4. And so Rafik, yeah, well, I mean, he couldn't resist, just like everyone else. He took the queen, and Ella took check, and then took his queen, and black comes out ahead here. Rook takes, rook takes. Now, if the rook takes the bishop, the knight takes. If the king takes the knight, we've got this check. And if here, you fork. If king here, the rook check. And you'd still have the fork. So fantastic idea. And it's an amazing position it ends up in.
What game is this? What game is this? Who played?
This is Rafik Rubiel against Ella Papanek. And Rafik moved here instead. Ella came back, defending the knight. I mean, and bishop takes knight, pawn to b6. Tries to attack the bishop, but she just retreated, keeping the discovered check there. Oh, I'm sorry, the rook was still on that square. So Rafik retreated, but the rook attacks, still keeping in reserve this discovered attack by the knight. And now how to defend the bishop. And that was what was played, yes. There's nothing else anyway. But then the discovered check. And Ella played discovered check on the rook, and Rafik gave up. So, marvelous game. Is Ella here? Watch out if you're playing her tonight. Not so much time. I might show something that went wrong. We've had these brilliancies, and then sometimes you get a little tired late in the game. So this is a position that rose on one of the high boards, Tenzing Shaw against Kevin Kuzek. And, well, it's only 2 pawns left, and should be a drawn game. But, okay, Tenzing thought, okay, let's just trade him off, and he pushed the pawn to just trade one, and he's ready to sacrifice his bishop for the other. It's funny how such a logical move can be so bad. Okay, David, what did black do here? Just...
I'm not sure.
A5, yeah, just push, and suddenly there's one little pawn that was just there. How do you stop it? Do I have the right position? Yes, I do. Oh yeah, this is the problem here. You just, any other move, like just move the bishop before, and suddenly you can't get the pawn when it gets here because of that bishop. You're going to have to get it on that square. So he had to try there, push, back. but he lost this pawn then. And he's going to lose the bishop for the other pawn. That was, and what did he try? Came up, tried to push his pawn. King F5, pawn G6 maybe, that's, but he immediately pushed this pawn. Because if you take it, my bishop has time to get back, stop your pawn.
Last chance, bishop E6, E7.
Very good. That's, so he tried the best move. Hoping for pawn here, and you'd get your check and get the bishop. But Kevin didn't fall for that, and he played king to here, and Tenzing had to give up. That's one little mistake, just one very natural mistake.
So, cakes, pawn push, then stop. Yeah, then you play bishop to D.
Stop it with the bishop. Yeah, bishop F8 or bishop B2. Okay, I'll let you go. Good luck in the last round.